Hello and welcome to York Observatory's weekly Teletube broadcast, the online astronomy and astrophysics program written and presented by the students, faculty, alumni, and friends of York University. We are broadcasting live from the Alan Carswell Observatory, located at York University in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. York YouTube broadcasts most Wednesday nights at 7:30 p.m. local Toronto time at www.youtube.com/user/YorkUobservatory/live. For any questions or comments you have for our past shows, or if you have suggestions for future topics, please send us an email at observe@yorku.ca. You can always connect with us on Twitter or Instagram with the handle @YorkObservatory and on Facebook at Alan I. Carswell Obs. We would like to inform you about the Summer 2023 Astronomy in Residence program. This program is a collaboration of the Alan I. Carswell Observatory with Killarney Provincial Park to host astronomers in the certified dark sky sites of Killarney to lead in-person presentations and shows using the park's observatory. Professor Mary Helen Armour, faculty at York University, is the third 2023 astronomer in residence, and she arrived at Killarney Park recently on July 24th. She teaches a number of science courses in the natural science division. Her background is both astronomy, master's in physics and astronomy, and earth science, PhD in near surface geophysics and modeling. If you are at Killarney Park, make sure to stop at the observatory and say hi. In the meantime, the blogs can be found on www.yorku.ca/science/observatory/AIR/astronomy-in-residence-blog. Good evening, everyone. I'm Sergiy, and I'm joined by Ren, Marianna, Prameet, and of course our esteemed guest this evening, Quinton Weyrich. And we're here from the Alan Carswell Observatory at York University. Today, we've got a fantastic presentation about light pollution by our guest, Quinton Weyrich, who will be shortly introduced by Ren. The observatory at York campus is in Toronto, and we would like to welcome you all to our show and to acknowledge the traditional land that our telescope is on. The observatory acknowledges its presence on the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations. The area known as Toronto has been taken care of by the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Huron-Wendat, and the Métis. It is now home to many Indigenous peoples. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Our stargazing and astronomical efforts join the long history and current practices of astronomy for this land. The observatory looks forward to continuing to learn and revitalizing our knowledge in this area.
Welcome, everyone. Before we get started with our main show, we want to give you a little update about what you can see this coming week in Ontario. The moon is in the waning gibbous phase with an illumination of 99.91% as seen from Earth. This is the phase where the illumination of the moon will decrease each day until it reaches 50%, i.e. the last quarter phase. Meaning in this phase, the moon will go down from 99% to 50.1%. The waning gibbous phase, like all moon phases, will last just over 7 days. The sunset tonight is at 8:41 p.m. EDT, and there are many objects in the night sky to see. The moon will be up tonight above the horizon around 10 p.m. EDT, along with Saturn and Jupiter. Saturn will be very close to the moon, and Jupiter can be found to the left of it. And if those planets aren't enough, Uranus will also be up, found close to Jupiter. The red giant branch star Arcturus will also be up in the night sky, along with the variable star Vega. Other celestial objects such as Spica, Altair, Capella, and many more will be up throughout the night. All of these objects will be visible to the naked eye on a clear, dark sky. However, the use of binoculars or a telescope for viewing is always encouraged. These objects are super cool and definitely something you do not want to miss, so make sure to get outside and look up at the stars. Now, I'd like to give it away to Ren so she can introduce our guest speaker for tonight's Teletube.
Thank you, Marianna, for an incredible What's Up in the Sky. Today's Teletube is being presented by Quinton Weyrich. Quinton is the current outreach coordinator for the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada at the David Dunlap Observatory, as well as a master's student here at York University. He is working towards a master's in physics and is involved in some incredible atomic physics projects. His current research project involves measuring the electric dipole moment of an electron, which is a crazy interesting research project. Quinton enjoys hiking, and weather permitting, he loves to ski. Quinton also loves writing and stargazing. Quinton used to be the student coordinator for the Alan I. Carswell Observatory in 2020 and 2021. Quinton just recently came back from being our astronomer in residence out in Killarney Provincial Park, where he hosted lectures and viewings of the night sky out at Killarney's observatory. He was astronomer in residence from July 10th to July 23rd, and if you are interested in reading all about his incredible adventures, make sure to check out the Astronomer in Residence blog. You can find it at www.yorku.ca/science/observatory/AIR/astronomer-in-residence-blog. We are very excited to have you here tonight, Quinton, so please take it away.
Thank you so much, Ren. It's great to be here tonight. So I'm going to go and get us started with my presentation. Here we go. All right, thank you, everybody. So I'm going to be sharing a presentation that I gave at Killarney Provincial Park, where I was staying as the astronomer in residence, talking about light pollution, what it is, and what we can do about it, how we can take back the night sky, as you will. So I'd like to start with a little bit of background information on Killarney Provincial Park itself. So in 1939, A.Y. Jackson, who was a famous Canadian painter, a member of the Group of Seven, he petitioned the government to protect a lake called Trout Lake, which is now known as OSA Lake, and I'll explain what that acronym means in a second. And essentially, he found out that there was a logging project that had been proposed there, and he believed that the lake was such a natural piece of beauty, it ought to be protected. So he petitioned the government, and they took his advice. They took it into trust, and they prevented the logging. And in 1959, Killarney became a wilderness preserve. So in 1964, it was upgraded to the level of a provincial park. And this was also with the help of additional lobbying by the Group of Seven. And in 2006, the park was expanded. So now, if you look at this map over here, you can see this is the region of Killarney Provincial Park. This light green area is the original park. And the sort of darker green region is Killarney Lakelands and Headwaters Provincial Park. And this was essentially just taken into, technically speaking, it's a different park. But the reason why it exists is just to protect the headwaters and make sure that all the water that is flowing through the park is protected and nice and clean. In 2010, Killarney Provincial Park Observatory opened, and this was the first public observatory in an Ontario provincial park. And when it opened up, there was a little observatory dome called Wasa Dibabing, which is Anishinaabemoan, an Ojibwe word meaning the far in the distance seeing, or seeing as far as the eye can see. In 2018, they upgraded the observatory, and this was essentially in celebration of the fact that Killarney became Ontario Park's first dark sky preserve. And when they upgraded it, they added an additional observatory, K'che Wasa Dibabing. So this comes with I believe a 16-inch telescope. The original observatory had a 10-inch telescope. So altogether, they've got 2 reflecting telescopes and a couple refractors as well. So if anybody's interested in checking out Killarney Provincial Park, it's absolutely gorgeous. I've got an image that I took at the park here. It's got beautiful granite trails. It's got beautiful quartzite mountains off in the distance. It's about an hour outside Sudbury. It's located on the northern shore of Georgian Bay. And if anybody gets, if you ever get the opportunity, if you're thinking of going on a camping trip or something, you're looking at places to go, I cannot recommend Killarney enough. The fact that it's a dark sky preserve gives you really, really fantastic views of the night sky. And I'll be talking a little bit more about that later. So what is a dark sky preserve? Well, it's a category. Technically, it's called an international dark sky place, if you're referring to the international category. It was created by the International Dark Sky Association, or the IDA. And the purpose of this is to encourage communities, parks, and protected areas around the world to preserve and protect dark sites through responsible lighting policies and public education. And what's interesting is Canada actually has a stricter definition. So the policies that you have to enact to become recognized as a Canadian dark sky preserve are a lot stricter than what it might take in some other countries. And this was partially due to the work done by my employer, the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada, RASC. So we did a lot of research on exactly what needs to be done in order to protect the dark sky, to give people a nice view of the night sky. And our research ended up informing the policies that got enacted here in Canada. So RASC has a few different dark sky sites. These are the characteristics that apply to the dark sky sites in Canada. So any kind of dark sky site has to have strict controls on artificial lighting, and they also have to promote reduction of light pollution to the public and nearby municipalities. So it isn't just that the site itself is dark, there's also an educational component that comes with it. It needs to be an intentional decision to darken the night sky and to educate the public about why this is an important task. So there's a few different classifications. So an urban star park is designed to be the most accessible type of dark sky site. And these are located near to cities so that folks from the city can come in and get a view of the dark sky. But because they're located so close to the city, there's the possibility of significant sky glow. So they're not as dark as some of the other categories. A dark sky preserve, which is what Killarney is located in a more remote location. So there's less sky glow. And the purpose of these is specifically to allow people who are interested in astronomy to come in, to set up a telescope, possibly even to use an on-site observatory and see the night sky for themselves. So this is designed to be accessed by people at night. The other type is a nocturnal preserve, which is not necessarily designed to be accessed by people. It's designed to protect the nocturnal environment for wildlife. So a lot of locations may not necessarily have infrastructure for people to observe the night sky there, but they still have these beautiful dark night skies. All right, so I mentioned sky glow. What is sky glow? So essentially what sky glow is it's bright light from a nearby urban center, essentially from like artificial lighting that is used to keep that city illuminated, that seeps out into the surrounding environment and also into the sky. So during the day, the reason why you can't see the stars is because, the sun is up. So the stars are all still there, but the sun is so much brighter than them and it's producing so much light, the stars by comparison are just completely washed out. Well, the same effect can happen at night with artificial lights from cities. So this map here, this is essentially a map of all the sky glow hotspots. So any white region on Earth is what we would call an 8 or 9 on the Bortle scale. This is a scale designed to measure sky glow. So this is inner city lights. So you can see within this region, the night sky is so bright that you often can't see any stars at all. Then it goes through red, which is Bortle 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. 3 is like a rural sky. 4 is a suburban or rural transition sky. 2, by the time you get down to 2, you have a very dark sky. This is what Killarney is. And the absolute darkest sky you can get is a Bortle 1. Bortle, anything that's a 2 or 1 on the Bortle scale is something that could be qualified as a dark sky site in Canada. So I talked about sky glow. It's this intrusion of bright light from the cities that kind of makes it harder to see the features of the night sky. I've got an example of this in the bottom right corner here. This is Phoenix, Arizona, but it's taken from the desert from 89 kilometers away. So you can see that even though you're quite far outside the city limits, there's just this strip of bright lights on the horizon and it completely washes out all the stars that are near the horizon. But there are other kinds of light pollution. So there's light trespass, there's glare, there's light clutter, there's over illumination, and there's also light pollution from satellites, which is a newer problem, and one that we're still not quite sure how to fix. So I've got some examples of this here. This example on the top left here, this is from an episode of Seinfeld. Some people in the audience might recognize it. It's from episode 142 called The Chicken Roaster. And the plot of this episode is a chicken restaurant opens up next to the cast's building. And they put up a sign, and the sign shines directly into Kramer's room, and it bathes the room in this bright red light and completely messes up his vision. So this is what light trespass is. This is when you essentially have light that is built too close to somebody else's property, and it shines at a near horizontal angle. So it shines directly into their property and disturbs them. Glare is fairly self-explanatory. It's any kind of over bright light. It can range from anything that's powerful enough to literally damage vision to anything that's just a nuisance and can distract people. So the high beams on a car are an example of glare. Any kind of reflected sunlight can cause glare. Any kind of light that is overly bright to the point where it blocks out anything else that you would want to see, or it kind of washes out what you're seeing, so you're not able to make out differences in color. Any of that is glare. Light clutter is when there's too many different lights all around, and they serve as a distraction to people. This can be dangerous for pedestrians or people who are driving a vehicle, because it prevents them from being able to focus on what they're doing. And there's all these lights around them that are competing for your attention. So I've got an example from the Las Vegas Strip, which is, if anybody's been to Las Vegas, you'll know it's a very illuminated city. There's lots of lights all over the place. Over illumination is essentially any kind of inefficient light usage. So any situation where you are using more energy than you need to in order to light a building up. So this could be, you have extremely bright lights, you have old inefficient lights, or alternatively, a lot of indirect lighting is an example of over illumination. So some locations will choose to, rather than shine lights directly from the roof to illuminate the floor, they'll shine kind of onto the wall, and the light will be reflected off the walls and illuminate the building that way. But you require more light to achieve the same light level in order to light a building in that way. So in this case, it's a less efficient way of lighting something. And I'll talk about the satellites in a little bit. So why is this important? Well, there's a few reasons. There's scientific implications for light pollution. There's health implications. There's environmental implications, and there's also cultural implications. So I'm going to go over all of those. So the scientific implications, essentially, light can drown out any kind of astronomical objects that we're interested in looking at, which can be a big deal for astronomers. You guys, you all work at the Alan I. Carswell Observatory. You work in Toronto. So you know the visibility at night, even with the observatory, is not great because we're in the middle of the city. We're not able to see all the things that you might be able to see, with a nice rural sky. So there are some filters that you can put on, like astronomical equipment, like a telescope, that can tune out artificial light because they're sensitive to certain frequency bands that tend to appear in artificial lighting. But this can't replace dark skies, because you're still going to tune out any kind of astronomical object that is visible in that same spectrum, right? You also have, and as a result of this, we have a lot of high sensitivity observatories built in remote locations. So for example, this picture here is of La Silla Observatory, which is in the Atacama Desert in northern Chile. And there's, I believe, upwards of 4 really major observatories built in the Atacama, just because it's so dark. It's some of the darkest skies on Earth. And in addition to that, it's also very dry. It's one of the driest deserts on Earth. So you also don't have interference with too much humidity in the air that can cause optical equipment to deform. But even if you do that, even if you locate your observatory to a nice remote location, you still have the problem of satellites. So satellites, they can reflect sunlight off of their surfaces. We call these iridium flares. So I've got some images here of iridium flares captured in like a longer exposure image. So this bright streak across the sky in this image on the top left, that is not a comet, it's not a shooting star or anything like that. That is a satellite passing across this frame. I believe this is a couple seconds of exposure time. And the satellite is, as it catches the sun, it shines very brightly, and it causes this smear across the shot. We've got another example below. This is a 333-second exposure, and there's 19 separate streaks across this image from Starlink satellites. So any kind of astrophotography image that you're capturing has the risk of having a satellite pass through it, especially if it's a longer exposure image. The longer your exposure, the more opportunity there is for satellites to sort of photobomb you. And these will, and it's very difficult to get around this because you can't just locate your telescope on a part of the Earth where there aren't any satellites overhead. Satellites are always overhead. That's the whole purpose, right? This also applies to radio astronomy, actually. Satellite internet. Perhaps this will come up in the questions as well, but I want to emphasize this isn't only a visual spectrum problem, but perhaps we can talk about that a bit later. So what kind of health implications does this have? We've talked about the scientific implications. We've talked about how this can interfere with astronomical research. Well, the obvious health implication is that glare and light clutter, these can distract drivers and pedestrians. And this is not a small problem. Driving collisions on roads cause thousands of deaths every year. The addition, when you add glare and light clutter into the mix, this is not going to make the roads any safer. Also, light trespass can result in poor sleep. I mean, that's what that entire episode of Seinfeld was about. But in general, artificial light at night, over-illumination, and light with improper spectral distribution can disrupt the circadian rhythm. So what the circadian rhythm is it's the body's daily cycle of processes, sleeping, waking, metabolism, etc. All of these are coordinated to occur at a certain time of day. It is evolutionarily advantageous for us to start to feel sleepy when it starts to get dark, because this is the time when we have evolved to be less active. So our brain has to be able to assess what time of day it is so it can start producing hormones like melatonin, for example, to help you fall asleep. And it picks up cues from the light that it sees, not just the amount of light, not just the level of light, but also the spectrum of that light, the color of that light. So during midday, you are going to pick up a lot more blue light because the sun is high in the sky is blue. But around sunrise and sunset, you're going to pick up a lot more reddish light because the sun is passing through the horizon at an oblique angle, and it has more opportunity for the blue light to be scattered away. This creates that red color in the evening and the morning. In addition, it's also passing through a lot more dust near the surface of the Earth. Both of these contribute to the redness of the sky in the morning and the evening. So it's not just that your brain notices if your surroundings are brighter than they should be and keeps you awake, but they also notice how much blue light there is versus how much red light, and this will have an influence on the chemicals that your brain is producing. And disruption of the circadian rhythm does have some real health implications. So some conditions suspected or confirmed to be associated with irregular circadian rhythm include headaches, fatigue, stress and anxiety, low mood, decreased sexual function, obesity, immunological disorders, diabetes, mental disorders, cancer, preterm births, and cardiovascular disorders, among others. So this is the circadian rhythm underpins all activity that your body goes through. So there's going to be a lot of possible side effects to having a circadian rhythm that is out of sync. And this is a growing problem for people in the modern era where much of the environments that we spend time in are extremely well lit, no matter what time of day it is. It also poses a particular problem for people who do shift work, where maybe they have to be up at a later time than would be, I guess, normal for somebody living a few hundred years ago. They might now spend more of their waking hours during the day in lower light conditions and trying to sleep during higher light conditions. So all of these can affect circadian rhythm. So environmental implications. So humans are not the only species that are affected by light pollution. So many bird species rely on starlight to navigate at night, and they can be drawn to lighthouses, drilling platforms, and illuminated wind turbines. Any kind of high up illuminated structure can kind of act in a similar way to the stars would and draw them toward that and divert them from their path. A moonlight sky is also really heavily polarized. This is a detail that not a lot of people realize. But artificial lights are not. They don't have a very strong polarization to them. And many animals, especially arthropods and insects, can actually see the polarization of light. So if anybody in the audience doesn't know what polarization of light is, essentially light is a wave. It consists of an electric field and a magnetic field. And the electric field is waving, it's oscillating, but it has to oscillate in a certain direction, right? So it could be vertically polarized, horizontally polarized, diagonally polarized. It can even be circularly polarized. It can be spinning around. We cannot detect which direction a given ray of light is polarized in, but we have certain types of sunglasses that block out light that's polarized in a certain direction. This is how they dim that light. And a lot of species can actually detect the polarization of light. So here I've got an illustration of images that were taken over the course of the night. The North Star is located at the center of these images, and all of these little dead pixels that you see, these are star trails that have been manually edited out of the image. So this was collected over several hours. So the star is moved across the sky. And they've had to be removed because they add their own polarization to the image that was undesirable. But you can see the rural sky, there is a directional polarization. The light is more strongly polarized in one direction versus another. But the urban sky, that's not the case, because so much of this light is artificial. So much of it comes not from the moon, which is being diffracted through the atmosphere and becoming polarized that way, but it comes from these artificial light sources that don't really emit any kind of polarized light. So this would just completely wash out any overall polarization effect that you would be able to pick up on if you were an insect, and can really affect your ability to navigate and know which direction you're going. What other kind of environmental implications are there? Well, many amphibians, they receive reproductive and maturation cues from moonlight. And if they are exposed to too much light or light that doesn't follow a regular day-night cycle, they can develop prematurely or in a stunted manner. Many mammals reproduce less readily in the presence of artificial light because they have an instinct to attempt to reproduce when it's dark. And if it doesn't get dark enough, they're going to be a lot less willing to breed, and this will result in lower numbers of that species. Sea turtles, this is a fairly well-known example. Sea turtles lay eggs on dark beaches, and the hatchlings can be confused by lights and fail to find the sea. Because the way that they're navigating out to the sea under normal conditions is they can see the starlight above them, and they can see the shadows of the sand dunes in front of them. So they know which way to go to get out toward the sea. They go toward where it's brighter. But if there's a big bright city behind them, like if the sea turtle lays its eggs on the shores of a bright city, a lot of the sea turtles are not going to be able to find their way to the ocean. They could end up in a ditch. They could end up on the street, or just fail to avoid predators and make it up to the sea. Fireflies are another really good example. They use their own light to attract mates. But if you're in a situation where you are not able to outshine the lights in your environment, like if you're near a street light, then a lot of the other insects are going to be attracted to that street light and not to you. So all of these have implications on how well a certain species is able to reproduce, and consequently for the whole food chain, right? Because if a certain prey species, if its population decreases, then you have a situation where all of the animals that rely on that species for food are now no longer able to find as much food. So artificial light can limit the dark vision of species that forage at night. It also makes them more susceptible for predators to find them. And a really good example is that moths and insects are attracted to light, and they'll tire themselves out just trying to fly toward the same light source again and again. I'm sure that you guys have seen this happen. And this makes it easier for them to be preyed upon. And this has implications for both the animals that prey on them as well as the plants they pollinate. Moths are pollinators. A lot of people may not know that, but a lot of plant species do rely on moths to help distribute their pollen. And I've got an example here, wasps. Wasps are not a nocturnal species. They are most active during the day. So you might think that they'd be more immune to light pollution because artificial lights don't outshine the sun or anything like that. But what does end up happening is a lot of nocturnal insects get drawn toward artificial lights like street lamps and stuff. And any spiders that build their webs near those lights are going to trap a lot more insects than they would normally. And the wasps can use those trapped insects as a food source. So this changes the feeding habits of the wasps. This changes where they go to get their food. And this has implications not only for the nighttime ecosystem, but now for the daytime species as well. So it's all an interconnected system. So there's all sorts of other environmental implications. Light pollution near lakes prevents zooplankton from eating algae. And this can create big algal blooms that can kill off a lake's plants and actually be quite toxic. So in this image here, I've got an algal bloom on Lake Erie, which was so large that it was actually visible from space. So this is a NASA image. Trees in cities will retain their leaves for longer because they receive cues to start shedding their leaves based on the amount of light they're getting. This is why they know to shed their leaves in the winter. But if they're always being illuminated by street lights, then they could retain those leaves even into the winter time. And that means that snow can easily build up on those branches because they have all these leaves now, and it can break the branches off and damage the tree. Also, light destroys a chemical called nitrate radicals, which are part of the process of breaking down ozone within smog. So part of the reason why smog can build up to the point where it does and cause such poor breathing quality in cities is because part of the natural process that would break down some of the chemicals in this smog is disrupted by artificial lighting. So I've talked about the health impacts, I've talked about the scientific impacts, I've talked about the environmental impacts, but I also want to say there is a cultural level to this as well. So for thousands of years, for almost all of our history as human beings, we have been growing up in an environment where when the sun set, as long as there weren't clouds out, you could see hundreds and thousands of stars. And it used to be, if any of you have the opportunity to go to Killarney, I really recommend it because you get to see the same kind of sky that we as human beings would have evolved under. This has influenced our culture in a lot of ways. It's influenced our art. It's influenced our mythology. Every culture has its own set of constellations because it's a universal human behavior to look up at the sky and try to understand it, to try to classify those constellations together and explain what the patterns you're seeing are, and use that to help yourself navigate. And we do lose a certain aspect of that cultural heritage if we never get to see the stars that inspired our ancestors to create, the myths that still affect our lives to this day. The image I have on the right here is an image of some Ojibwe constellations. Just as an example, this was actually used in a graphic at the Killarney Provincial Park Observatory. The image I've got on the left here essentially is just comparing Orion, which is one of the brightest constellations in the night sky, comparing what it looks like in the rural sky versus what it looks like in the urban sky. This is in Provo, Utah. So you do see, like, even a really bright iconic constellation like Orion, still a lot of it gets lost in the urban cities, and it's unfortunate. So what can we do about it? Well, I'm not proposing that we live in unlit cities, stumbling our way around in the dark, not knowing where we're going. That would be extremely dangerous. But one of the really big things that we can do is just to point light at the ground instead of upwards or sideways, because that's what we need to be lighting up anyway, right? Like we don't need to be lighting the sky up in order to see our way at night. We don't need to be lighting the horizon up. All that's doing is adding to the sky glow, adding to light trespass shining into other people's windows. We just need to be able to see the ground below us. So a full cutoff fixture is a fixture like this one at the bottom right here. You can see that it kind of hides the actual bulb inside this housing and only allows it to shine below a 90-degree angle. A cutoff fixture is any kind of fixture that doesn't allow light to shine upward, but might allow it to shine out horizontally. That's like this middle image. And a full and a no cutoff fixture is one that essentially has 360 degrees of illumination and can shine up into the sky. So a much better design for any kind of urban lighting, unless it's absolutely necessary to shine light upward, is to have some kind of full cutoff fixture that just shines downward. And this applies not only to the external environment, but also within buildings. You can have light pollution inside a residence. It can shine into windows if it's not desired. It can shine out into the surrounding environment. So it really is, unless there's a benefit to having that additional degree of illumination, a lot of the light that is going above the horizon is just wasted. I also wanted to mention, if you reduce glare and you reduce over illumination, this doesn't seem to have a negative impact on crime. So there's been some preliminary studies that have been done. I've included the link for this. This is the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada is essentially archiving this this paper. But what it's talking about is the city of Des Moines decided to, as a test, kind of implement more of these full cutoff fixtures that would only shine light downward. They wouldn't illuminate out toward the horizon as much. And what they found was that the reduction in illumination did not lead to an increase in crime, because you're still illuminating the ground. You're still allowing people to see clearly. If anything, you're making visibility better because you're reducing glare as well. So there are some good preliminary studies to indicate that there really aren't any downsides to this, other than the fact that it would cost money to replace these pre-existing fixtures. What else can we do? Well, just smarter light use in general. Motion activated lights at night. We don't necessarily need to have lights illuminating constantly if it's a low traffic area. We can just have them come on when people are passing through. This has security benefits. If you have a motion activated light in your backyard, it'll come on if somebody tries to enter your property, and you can know that somebody is in the premises. You can have lights on timers so that people don't need to remember to turn them off themselves when they're done using them, especially if you're a business that only operates during the day. Lights with a redder spectrum have less impact on human and animal circadian vision, circadian rhythm, and night vision. Like I mentioned earlier, the brain responds to the color of light. So light that is redder is less disruptive to the circadian rhythm, and our eyes are also less sensitive to light in the red part of the spectrum. So it's easier. It doesn't cause our eyes to adjust as much to the light. We're able to see better if we go from a red environment into a dark environment. If anybody's ever been to the observatory, you'll know that we light the entrance to the observatory, the stairway, with red light for exactly this reason. It makes it easier for your eyes to adjust to the dark without it being too dark for you to actually see where you're going. Like I said, direct lighting rather than indirect lighting, this saves energy. It also saves money if you are responsible for paying for that electrical bill. Many lights simply exist just to catch the eye. So any kind of advertising that's constantly lit up, any kind of just flashy lighting that doesn't really need to be there other than to serve as a distraction. This is all light clutter. Honestly, my opinion is we'd probably be better off without 99% of this. Upgrading to more efficient lighting as part of infrastructural revitalization. And I want to mention a lot of these aren't just individual decisions. I don't want to say that it's your personal responsibility to spend the money to get your home into the situation where it's as eco-friendly as possible. It is a societal change that we really ought to pursue as part of intelligent urban planning, because we can create safer cities, safer for drivers at night. We can create a more sustainable environment for ourselves. We can create a better, healthier population this way. It really is something that we all stand to benefit from, and it really shouldn't be unloaded onto individual people to finance themselves. The other thing we can do about it is dark sky preserves. So this is something that we're already doing, especially here in Canada. We've really put a lot of resources into preserving Canada's wilderness and preserving its dark skies. So this can protect vulnerable wildlife where it's most needed, especially the nocturnal preserves in the more remote regions. And they educate the public about the importance of reducing light pollution, which is what I'm trying to do right now. And they give everybody the opportunity to experience the true night sky. So this is an image that was taken at a festival called Stars Over Killarney in 2022. This was taken at the Killarney Provincial Park Observatory, and you can see everybody here. This is a crowd of several dozen people, I believe upward of 60 people. But all of this is just lit with red, white headlamps that people are just using to preserve the dark sky above them. And look at the kind of view that you can get. This is a longer exposure shot. So this isn't exactly what you'd be able to see, but you can see the full Milky Way stretching over your head on a regular basis in Killarney. And it used to be the entire world would look like that at night. And I think that we do owe ourselves the opportunity to see the universe in its natural splendor like this. So I'm going to leave it there. This is just an image, kind of a closing out image. This is called the Black Marble. It was captured in 2012 using a SWOMI NPP satellite. And it shows the dark side of the Earth, the night side. You can actually see Hurricane Sandy approaching the coast of Florida, because at this point in 2012 that was occurring. And I really like this image because it really sums up the entire theme of this. On the one hand, we can see the huge potential that human beings have to change their environment in ways that we don't necessarily predict. Hurricanes like Hurricane Sandy are becoming more and more prevalent now as a result of human industrial activity, and it's an unintended consequence. Climate change is an unintended consequence of human activity, and a way that we have influenced our environment in a way that we did not intend to, in a way that is posing risks to us. But the fact that we were able to take this image at all requires a huge degree of development, our ability to launch satellites, our ability to industrialize to this point. And it really does show just how much capacity human beings have to change their environment if they put their minds to it. So I do believe that we can solve our problems if we are able to devote our energies in the correct way. So I'm going to leave it there. Thank you. And I just realized, speaking of light pollution, I just realized how dark this room is. I'm very sorry. I'm gonna turn a light on. I'm sorry. My face is probably very hard to see. My apologies. Just give me a second, please.
Thank you so much for your interesting and insightful presentation. I especially like the method of reducing light pollution by pointing in lamps downward. We all have several questions for you. Our first question would be, what is the most novel way to counter light pollution for astronomy?
Oh, okay, that is an interesting question. I do think the introduction of like certain filters which will block out certain wavelengths of light that are predominantly used by artificial light is an interesting idea. You really can't beat moving a telescope to a more remote area, but it is an interesting way to kind of get around the light pollution if you are operating in a more urban environment. So essentially, there's certain wavelengths of light. There's a few different mechanisms that artificial illumination uses to generate light, and these preference certain frequencies. So if you put a filter on your telescope that will block out those particular frequencies, you can cut out a lot of that light pollution without necessarily impacting your view of the night sky, depending on what you're looking at. So if you're looking at something that is not particularly bright in that frequency that you're blocking out, you can get decent results with this. But like I said, it's not a substitute for moving if you have a really high precision telescope like La Silla Observatory, then you are going to need to locate it in a more remote location.
Interesting. Thank you. Oh, my second question for you would be, what wavelengths of light are less affected by light pollution?
Yeah, so as I was saying, when you have a redder wavelength of light, it does less to affect your night vision. It also does less to change your circadian rhythm. So this is, you may have heard some people like to use blue light glasses, especially if they're going to be like on the computer late at night, Some electronics, like some cell phones now, have a nighttime mode, which will decrease the amount of blue light that your screen is producing. And all of this is essentially a way of mitigating the change to your circadian rhythm by the light from that screen. So by decreasing your exposure to blue light specifically, you are doing a better job of simulating the normal frequencies of light that you would be picking up late in the day, and making it easier for your brain to produce melatonin and other hormones that allow you to sleep properly.
Thank you. I just want to ask, in addition to this question, what about radio waves? Since now in the modern world we use radios,
Yes.
is that affected by, does that affect radio astronomy?
Yes. Okay. Thank you. I said I was going to come to this earlier, and I forgot to mention it. It absolutely does. So a lot of radio telescopes will enforce radio quiet zones, where any kind of radio frequencies, I believe within a certain frequency band, are not permitted. You have to turn those off. You can't bring those into a certain region around the telescope, and this is to prevent those radio signals from that the telescope is sensitive to, from being affected by the signals from these artificial sources. So this is effectively the same as light pollution, right? You still have an artificial form of electromagnetic radiation, which is coming in and interfering with astronomical results. And we do have some ways of getting around this. The radio quiet zones are quite well defined. I think they do a pretty good job of preventing Earth-based radio transmissions that are unwanted, but they don't work on satellites. So this is another way that satellites can end up affecting astronomy and astrophotography, because satellite internet relies on radio and microwave. So it's constantly using these signals to communicate with each other, with the ground. You can't just have the satellites turn off whenever they're passing over a radio telescope. It doesn't work that way. And additionally, a lot of the radio signals that these satellites will create are actually unintentional. They're not necessarily meant to be for transmission. They're just kind of background noise produced by the operations of the telescope itself. So especially when you put big constellations of these together, like the Starlink satellites, you can actually create a lot of radio interference. And this is an active problem that we are still trying to figure out what to do about. But yeah, this is effectively another form of light pollution that we're trying to figure out how to address.
Thank you very much for your questions. Now I'll pass it on to Ryan.
Thank you, Sergiy. So, Quinton, you recently were our astronomer in residence up at Killarney. So I was wondering what you think the #1 skill somebody can have to be a successful astronomer in residence.
Oh, that's a good question. I would say the #1 skill, more important even than like just knowledge of astronomy, is ability to improvise. Because the whole purpose of what you're doing, you aren't there to go over a pre-rehearsed script. You aren't there to say the exact same things to the exact same people again and again. What you want to do, you are there to educate people. They're going to come into your programs. They're going to have their own questions, and you need to be prepared to answer whatever questions they may have. But have fun. Like go in there with the purpose of having fun, talking to people, telling them about astronomy. Yeah, just have a conversation with them. It doesn't have to go according to some pre-rehearsed script, but you definitely want to be spontaneous, be outgoing, and just have fun talking to people. That's what you're there to do, I'd say. That's how as an educator you can really stick with people essentially and give them a good experience.
Yeah, I never thought of having like that skill to be able to improvise. That's actually a really good one. And then my second question is there anything like an individual can do to reduce light pollution?
Yeah, there are. One thing I would suggest, if you're purchasing a car or if you're in the market for a car, don't get one that has extremely bright running lights. Those are, I've had the displeasure of driving in front of people with really bright running lights, and almost feels like they've got their high beams on all the time, and I can't see anything inside the cabin of my car. I don't know why there's a trend toward really bright running lights lately, but it isn't safer, because if you are making it harder for the person in front of you to see, and it's more likely for the person in front of you to get into an accident, it's also more likely for you to get into an accident. So I'd say do some research on how bright your running lights are. I believe there are guidelines on this that you can find on the internet. You don't need to go to the high range. You can just focus on like the average light level that running lights produce. I'd say go with the recommended guidelines that you're able to find. Another really great way to do it is, if you can afford to do so, if you own a home, if you own a business, if you have the ability to change the lights within that building, replace that. Try to, as much as possible, try to light that location up with full cutoff lights. So anything where the bulb itself is recessed into the ceiling and will only shine downward, rather than say having a bulb that like sticks out below the roof and shines outward. This can contribute to light pollution in a lot of unfortunate ways. I understand that that's not an expense that a lot of people can afford. A lot of people can't afford to just renovate their home. A lot of people don't own their own home and rent, and they don't have the authority to make such a big change to the rental property. But one thing that you can do as an individual that will save you money is turn lights off when they're not in use. This will reduce your hydro bill, and it's also a really good way to prevent yourself from being exposed to too much artificial light when you're trying to go to bed, and it will prevent excess light being spilled into the external environment. But the one thing I do want to say, and I want to stress this again, is you should not take it as your personal responsibility to single-handedly solve the problem of light pollution. I think sometimes with messaging, especially around like anything that has an environmental impact, there's this idea that, everybody has to individually reduce our carbon footprint, reduce our light pollution footprint, to try to, and if we all do that, then we can make a difference. But if you aren't doing enough, then it's your fault if the crisis continues. I think that's a trap, and I think that's a wrong way of thinking about it. And I think that sometimes people bear a lot of guilt because they can't afford to do more, and that's not the right way to approach the problem. I think that this is a social problem, and that at the end of the day, it's going to be changed by good policy that is brought about by people all actively acting in their collective best interest. So I'm not saying that there's nothing you can do as an individual to help prevent light pollution, and I really appreciate you asking this question. But I do just want to stress, like, I don't want anybody to come away from my talk thinking like this is your individual responsibility to solve. This is a collective human problem that we are going to solve collectively.
Well, thank you very much. Those were absolutely incredible answers.
Thank you.
So now I'm going to pass it off to Marianna.
Thank you, Ren. And that was a really nice presentation, Quinton. I do have a couple of questions of my own. Starting off with, what was your favorite object you observed in the night sky while you're at Killarney?
It might sound like a basic answer, but it's the Milky Way. So that image of that image that was on the title slide, not the one for my section of the presentation, but the ones that you guys prepared. I believe that was my own image of the Milky Way. I captured quite a few of those. And despite the fact that I've been working as an astronomer for at least half a decade now, pretty much since I started at York, since at least 2018, I've been working in the astronomical field. It wasn't until 2022, when I first worked at Killarney, that I actually got to see the Milky Way with my own eyes, because I'm from a more rural area, but there's still a lot of light pollution at where I live. In Toronto, the night sky is very washed out. It's very difficult to see something like that. It wasn't until I got out to Killarney, where the sky is nice and dark, that I saw the full extent of the Milky Way, and it just completely blew me away. It was actually my first night in Killarney back in 2022, and I was looking up at the night sky and I saw that, and I was like, I need to come back here. Like this is beautiful. I more people need to see this. I think everybody deserves the opportunity just to see, because that's the galaxy that we live in. We are a tiny, tiny part of this massive structure, and we can see it with our own eyes. And I really think that everybody deserves the opportunity to get to witness something like that and get to see the same beautiful night sky that our ancestors did. So for me, it's the Milky Way.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I personally have never seen the Milky Way, and I really want to. So I would have to agree. That would probably be my favorite object if I saw it too.
It's an appropriate image to put on the next slide.
So my last question is, where are some other certified dark sky locations in Ontario?
That's a great question. So we've got actually quite a few dark sky locations within Ontario. I believe we've got around 6 or so. So some of them that you may have heard of: Bruce Peninsula Fathom 5 National Marine Park, Lake Superior Provincial Park, Point Pelee National Park, and Torrance Barrens. Those are some other really fantastic dark sky preserves. Obviously, Killarney is the one that is near and dear to my heart. It's the only one of those that I've visited personally, although I hope to check them all out someday. It's not officially a dark sky preserve, I don't believe, at least it wasn't able to find it on the list. But I have heard that the dark sky in Algonquin Provincial Park is also really fantastic. So Algonquin is not quite as far a drive from Toronto as Killarney is. So if you want to go camping, if you want to see some dark skies, but you're not sure you can make it all the way up to Killarney, Algonquin is also a fantastic choice, and it's also just a beautiful place. So I'd highly recommend any of those locations.
Thank you. That was very great. Thank you again for your presentation and for answering all of my questions. I will now like to hand it over to Prameet for some final questions.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I have some questions as well. So first of all, how much less of the sky can we see now compared to a long time ago?
Oh, that's a good question. So if I could have the screen share back for a second, I can bring back the image of the world map with the Bortle scale. Would that be okay? Can I do that?
Yes, you can.
Okay, perfect. So I'll give you a graphic demonstrating this. So if we go back to the image of the Bortle scale, essentially anything that appears anything other than like the lightest gray. So pretty much all of the illuminated regions here have a significantly reduced level of dark vision. So the regions where you get like like the kind of dark sky that would have been common for most of human history are all very remote. Like we're talking northern Canada, Alaska, the Amazon, the Sahara, Central Africa, Siberia. A lot of these other regions, they've got quite a lot of light pollution actually. So pretty much any major city is going to have, it's going to be very, very hard to see the night sky. Now that said, this does kind of maybe present the situation in overly pessimistic terms, because like I said, there are still ways, even if you live in a large city, to see a really fantastic dark sky. This is the whole reason why urban dark sky sites exist, essentially to give people the opportunity to see a proper dark sky, even without fleeing out to the remote wilderness or something. But yeah, this is something that this is one of the ways that humans have made their mark on the globe, for better or for worse. So obviously, there's a lot of negative implications to this. There's a lot of positive implications to it, like the increase in urbanization has certainly allowed us to do things that we've never been able to do before. And you can't deny, no matter what, you can't deny that it has had an impact. So I guess that's how I would attempt to answer your question.
Okay, thank you. And another question, how did you spend your time in culinary when you weren't observing?
Yeah, so both of these images that you've included in your in this slide, both of these come from my blog. So the image on the left is from a hike that I did. I did a lot of hiking in Killarney. Killarney has, I believe, 5 easily accessible trails that you can hike in a day. So they've got trails like Chicken Creek, the Crack, Lake of the Woods. These are all some fantastic hiking trails. So this image on the left here, I believe, comes from the Granite Ridge Trail, kind of looking out over Georgian Bay. So I was hiking almost every day. I was doing a hike pretty much every day. I did have a lot of free time as an astronomer in residence. If anybody is considering doing this, I would recommend it because you do get a lot of free time. It's almost like a free vacation. This image on the right is from the way in. I took a little stop in a beautiful town on the way up called Perry Sound. Absolutely gorgeous location. It's a nice little resort town. So if you're driving up to Sudbury area, if you're driving up to Killarney, I recommend stopping in Perry Sound. And if anybody wants to know more about all the things I got up to while I was in Killarney Park, my blog is up on the site. It was, I believe, the link for it was mentioned at the beginning, so feel free to check that out.
Okay, thank you very much for answering all of our questions.
Thank you.
Oh, well, that's it, everyone. You have been listening to the Alan I. Carswell Observatory's weekly Teletube broadcast, the astronomy and astrophysics program written and presented by the students, faculty, alumni, and friends of York University. The hosts this evening have been Sergiy, Ren, Marianna, and myself, Prameet, with our special guest, Quinton. Make sure to leave any comments or questions in the comment section of the video and talk to us in the chat right now. We'll be around for the next 20 minutes to answer your questions. All of our programs are free, but if you would like to make a donation, see our website at yorku.ca/science/observatory. You can always connect with us on Twitter with the handle @YorkObservatory and check out our website for show notes, content, updates, and contact info. Thanks for tuning in. Clear skies and have a good night.